Here's a question most people never stop to ask. When did things start feeling heavy? Not heavy in an obvious way. Not a single event you can point to. Just a gradual sense that something, somewhere along the way, quietly shifted. That the life you're moving through each day takes more out of you than it gives back. You get up, you handle things, you keep going. But underneath all of it, there's a tiredness that sleep doesn't really fix. If you recognize that feeling, even a little, then what you're about to hear is worth staying with. Because there's a framework developed nearly a century ago by a psychologist most people have not heard of that describes exactly why life feels this way for so many people. And more importantly, it provides ideas you can start using in your daily life immediately. Alfred Adler was an Austrian psychologist working in the early 20th century, a contemporary of Sigmund Freud, though his ideas took a very different direction. Where Freud believed human behavior was largely shaped by the unconscious and by childhood trauma, Adler was more interested in something else. He wanted to know why, given similar circumstances, some people moved forward and others stayed stuck. His conclusion, after years of clinical work, was not what most people expected. He found that the origin of most human unhappiness was not trauma, not failure, not difficult circumstances. It was the friction of living alongside other people and not knowing how to navigate it. He argued that most human problems are, at their core, interpersonal problems. Think about the last time you felt genuinely off. Not physically, emotionally. That quiet unease, that mild dread, that vague dissatisfaction you couldn't quite name. Now trace it back. Almost always, if you follow the thread far enough, you arrive at a person. A colleague who handled something poorly, and you haven't been able to shake it. A friend who's been distant, and you don't know why. A family member whose expectations sit on your shoulders, even when they're not in the room. A relationship that used to feel straightforward, and no longer does. Adler's observation was simple. Strip another person out of almost any human problem, and the problem changes shape entirely, or disappears. Would you feel like you weren't enough if no one was measuring you? Would you feel left out if there was no one to be left out by? Would you carry shame if no one's judgment held any weight? The answer, honestly, is probably no. Which means the suffering isn't really about you. It's about the space between you and the people in your life. And that space, that unavoidable, uncomfortable, deeply human space, is where Adler focused all of his attention. Adler organized the social world into 3 areas he called the life tasks, the 3 unavoidable parts of life where every person, at every stage of life, must engage with other people. The first is work. Work is the most contained of the 3. The relationships it produces have a built-in purpose, a shared task, a common goal. There are roles, hierarchies, and professional norms. It gives people a structure to operate inside, which makes it easier to manage even when it's difficult. But don't mistake contained for simple. For many people, work is where the first real cracks appear. A manager who dismisses their input, a team that doesn't include them, a role that isolates more than it connects. The work itself may be fine. It's the relational texture around it that wears people down. Adler would say, if work is exhausting you, don't just look at the workload. Take a look at the relationships inside it. The second life task is friendship. And this one is harder, because unlike work, it has no external structure holding it together. Friendship is held together only by mutual choice. 2 people deciding, repeatedly and without obligation, to remain close. There's no contract, no shared deadline, no reason to show up except that you want to, or that you're afraid of what it means if you don't. This is where a particular kind of loneliness forms. Not the obvious kind, not being completely alone, but the subtler kind. Being surrounded by people and still feeling like no one really knows you. Having acquaintances, but not quite friends. Keeping connections at just enough distance that they feel safe. Adler saw this pattern clearly. He believed that many people unconsciously limit how close they allow others to get. Not because they don't want connection, but because deep connection comes with the possibility of real loss, real rejection, real disappointment. So they stay near the door, close enough to feel connected, far enough to stay protected. It works in a way, but it also means the connection never quite delivers what it promises. And over time, that gap between the closeness you have and the closeness you need becomes its own quiet source of weight. The third life task is love, and it is, by far, the most demanding. Not because love itself is hard, though it can be, but because of what it gradually asks you to become. Adler described committed love in terms of what it structurally changes. When two people build a life together, something shifts. A thread forms between them, not visible, but real. A mutual accountability that wasn't there before. Your decisions are no longer entirely your own. Someone else's stability, someone else's future, is now partly in your hands. That thread can feel like security. For others, it can feel constraining. The thread is the same. What differs is how ready a person is for that kind of weight. When children enter the picture, Adler's metaphor shifts. The thread becomes a chain, not as a criticism, not as a warning, but as an honest description of what it means to be responsible for another life. You cannot simply step away. You cannot make decisions that consider only yourself. Another person, one who did not choose any of this, needs you to stay. For many people, this is the moment when everything they thought they knew about themselves gets quietly rearranged. The chain is heavy, and it is also the most honest version of love that most of us will ever encounter. The kind that doesn't ask how you feel about it first. Adler saw this not as a burden to escape, but as the clearest test of something important, whether you are able to place another person's becoming above your own comfort. That, he believed, was where real growth lives. So here is where we land. If nearly all of your problems trace back to other people, to work relationships, to friendships that don't go deep enough, to the weight of love and its obligations, what do you actually do with that? The first thing, and maybe the most useful, is simply to stop treating your struggles as personal failures. The difficulty you're carrying right now is not proof that something is wrong with you. It is proof that you are living a human life, one that involves other people, which means it involves friction, misalignment, unmet expectations, and the ongoing negotiation of who you are in relation to everyone around you. That is not a flaw in you. It is the design of the social world. The second thing is to look honestly at which of the three life tasks is the source of the most weight right now. Is it work and the relationships inside it that are quietly grinding you down? Is it friendship, the loneliness of connection that never quite goes deep enough? Or is it love, the obligations of a relationship or a family that ask more of you than you feel like you have to give? Because once you can name which arena the friction is coming from, you can actually start doing something with it. Not fixing it overnight, not solving it with a single conversation or a decision, but engaging with it more honestly than you were before. And that is where things begin, slowly, to shift. The people in your life, the ones who make it complicated, the ones who add weight, the ones who you're not sure how to reach or how to let go, they are not your obstacles. They are, in Adler's view, the very material that growth is made from. Not because suffering is noble, not because pain automatically makes people wiser, but because we only discover who we are through other people. They reflect things back to us that solitude never could. So if things feel hard right now, if the weight is real and you're not sure where it's coming from, start there. Start with the relationships. Start with the friction. Not to fight it, not to fix everyone around you, just to understand it a little more clearly than you did before. That, more than almost anything else, is enough to begin.